I've always been interested in poetry. Poetry heals you, poetry calms you, poetry makes you sane. I can't paint, so I can't do it like that, but I can make paintings with words, and I love doing that, because I write the poetry that I want to read. Do you know what I mean? It's lovely. It's a really lovely thing. And then you feel the poetry in your mouth. It tastes great. And it's just fantastic. I really like poetry. When I did a performance once.
What is that?
Remember, so 2 o'clock. Oh, it was the Brighton Festival.
Yeah.
Been writing them like seriously since I was about 18, I reckon. But probably it all started really coming out in about 2000, about the year 2000. It all started going, or 19. Well, probably when I moved to Brighton, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, it all started happening when I moved to Brighton, because Brighton's the place. Brighton is maybe full of poetry. All you have to do is listen for it. I grew up in a council estate in Essex. I had a terrible traumatic event happen to me when I was a child. I saw a woman get killed by a train, and from that I developed post-traumatic stress disorder, which I still have. And I can get incredibly ill. I've been in psychiatric hospital a few times. It's been the hardest thing in my life, but it's also been the making of me. It's given me patience, it's given me resilience, it's given me courage. Poetry can help a person get through the great mental torture and pain. And sometimes poetry will enable you to accept the pain, and it will give you courage. Themes that are common in my poetry is love and beauty. It really is. It's like the themes are images like photos, putting words, making words into images, so your brain lights up with images, but you don't need to paint it. It paints itself in your mind from the words. Who would dare to make a city here, who dare to love instead of fear? That's Sonia's artwork as well. The one stable thing in my life that's happened throughout my whole entire life, that's always been there for me, and I've always been there for it, is poetry. That's it, you know? And everything else falls away. Because I literally lose my mind, and I literally lose everything. I've lost everything many, many times. I've been homeless, you know, stuff like that. I've lost everything many, many times in my life. But the one thing that I haven't lost, and has not lost me, is poetry. It's the one stable thing in my life that's always been there. It's my friend.
Yeah.
I came to Brighton about 7 years ago and came across the spoken word scene and started going to a few spoken word events and was encouraged to read out some of my own poetry, which I did, and which made me realise that I really, really wanted to do that. I wrote a poem about how I felt as somebody who had not long come out and felt very awkward myself. But it wasn't really until about 3 years ago that I started performing some of those poems, and they were received quite well. And it felt then as if I had found my voice, if you like, my own individual voice. Well, I actually came out about 8 years ago. I came out to myself about 4 years before that. And for various reasons I struggled with that secretly and didn't know how to deal with it. But then I found a kind of a community and friends. I found womanhood, womankind, if you like, being mainly so supportive and nurturing, that it made me want to express myself openly. When I look at the poems that I've done, there are a few few themes. One of them is to do with marginalisation and isolation of marginalised communities, and relationships, things to do with relationships and the difficulties of relationships. I'm perhaps a little bit too open about that in my poetry. But, another poet within a poem said, "This is not therapy," and I think in a way it is kind of therapy. When I read the poems, I realise things about myself that I didn't know that I knew, and so from that point of view, it's a kind of a therapy.
Grandparents. I used to live in Florida, and my grandparents used to come down from time to time from Holland or wherever they were at. And my grandfather was a writer, and my mother was a surrealist photographer. And they'd just be talking about the new books they wrote. They'd show us the new photography she'd made, and I just remember being fascinated, absolutely admiring them and their work. And I remember them coming down to the house and me running upstairs and grabbing my pens and pencils and papers and just writing down short stories just to impress my grandfather. And then my grandmother died when I was 4 or 5. She had cancer. And that really struck me. And that's when I really started to write. It was more of a journal kind of thing, more for me, to ease my mind, to ease the idea of death. Poetry, I started, let's say 3-4 years ago, really performing, really like being honest about what I'm saying, really believing in my work and wanting people to listen, wanting people to cry, wanting people to laugh, wanting people to feel, to look at the way they live their lives and really change a little something. I think I'm a relatively switched on guy. I try and see the world as it is. I don't lie to myself. I don't lie to others. And when I do find meaning in something, I think there is real meaning in something because I found meaning in it. It started as like a therapeutic kind of thing, but it's no longer therapy. But my depression is definitely something that helps me write. It's something I don't really want to seek help for either because it's who I am, and that doesn't bother me. I'm okay with being sad. I mean, people tend to need happiness to be. I really don't. It's kind of overrated. I've got pleasure. I've got friends, I've got writing. But it's definitely a motivating factor for my writing. It gives me a much more angry, critical outlook on the world around me. And I think that's conducive to good writing. My father killed himself. And when that happened, I was already doing poetry by this time, and it was still, that self-indulgent bullshit. But when my father died, I realized that there are more problems in the world than those that have to do with the self. Whereas I think a lot of people would have crushed down and broken down after the death of a father. I mean, he was my best friend. It motivated me, it pushed me forward, it helped me look for something real, look at the issues around the world, and that just made me realize, well, fuck, let's get a word out there, let's try and open some minds. It helped my depression a little bit as well, having my father die, as weird as that would sound, because, I just realized life is life, and you just gotta live it, you never know when it ends. So I just really delved into this deep poetry. I would deem it deep. That's for the audience to say, though. I deal a lot with the absurd. A lot of my poems don't really make sense unless you really, really get into them. I speak a lot about the man that believes he's above the rest, the man who believes he's more than the woman, the man who believes he's above the margins, those who frame the form of society. These men really anger me. I'm really racist in a sense. I don't like white men. It's to write like, I think it's Keats who said, if poetry does not come as naturally as the leaves on a tree, then it best not come at all. And I truly believe in that. There's this, what I call poetry mode or writing mode. I just feel it. I feel something and I don't even reread it. I write it and it's done and I put it away. I don't look at it for another week. And then I look back at it and if I like it, I keep it. Maybe edit it a little bit. If I don't, then I burn it. And